Why did the most powerful men in history submit to secret rituals that stripped them of their crowns, humiliated their pride, and reminded them that they were not untouchable? Why would a king who commanded armies, who possessed gold, who could bend nations to his will, kneel before priests, bleed into sacred fires, or cry on command to prove he was still favored by forces greater than himself? The answer is unsettling, because those rituals were chains. Chains older than their crowns, stronger than their armies, and more enduring than their empires. The rituals that controlled ancient kings were not symbolic games. They were weapons of power, invisible cages that bound rulers to priests, magicians, and traditions that whispered in their ears, "You are not free." Across the ancient world, the story repeats. Mesopotamia, Egypt, India, China, the jungles of Central America, the kingdoms of Africa, the cathedrals of medieval Europe. Everywhere, kings discovered the same truth. Power was not theirs alone. It was granted, renewed, and withdrawn through rituals that touched something primal in the human psyche. Ritual was more powerful than gold, more terrifying than swords, more enduring than law. And even kings, men called divine, lived in fear of it. In Mesopotamia, kingship was proclaimed as divine, but once a year the illusion was shattered. During the Akitu festival, the king draped in finery the day before was stripped of his crown, his weapons, even his dignity. He was dragged into the temple of Marduk, forced to kneel before the high priest, slapped hard across the face, and interrogated. He had to swear that he had not abused his power, that he ruled justly, that he obeyed the will of the gods. If tears streamed down his cheeks during this ritual humiliation, it was taken as a sign that the gods still favored him. But if he remained stoic, unbroken, it was seen as divine disapproval. Imagine it, the ruler of Babylon, commander of armies, judged not by victories or laws, but by his ability to weep at the right time in a sacred ritual. His entire reign balanced on a performance of weakness. Egypt tells the same story in a different tone. Pharaohs were gods in flesh, incarnations of Horus, sons of Ra, yet even gods required renewal. Without the said festival ritual of rejuvenation, a pharaoh's divine power was said to fade. During this rite, the king was tested physically, forced to demonstrate his strength by running symbolic courses, proving he was still fit to rule. If he faltered, his legitimacy withered. More than that, priests guarded the knowledge of temple rites, chants, and offerings that bound the pharaoh to map the cosmic order. If the rituals were disrupted, the Nile might not flood, crops might fail, chaos might return. The message was clear. The king might wear the crown, but it was the priests, the keepers of ritual, who held the strings. Travel to India, and you find the Rajasuya and Ashvamedha rituals, ceremonies so elaborate they lasted for months. A king seeking to prove his supreme sovereignty would release a consecrated horse to wander for a year. Wherever it roamed, rival kings had to either submit or challenge the ritual's authority. At the end of the year, the horse was sacrificed, its blood spilled in sacred fire, and the king was anointed as universal ruler. But the ritual did not merely glorify him. It reminded him that his power was conditional, that it had to be renewed through blood and fire, and through the cooperation of priests who guided every gesture. Without them, his title meant nothing. In China, emperors claimed the mandate of heaven, but heaven was fickle. The Son of Heaven had to perform sacrifices at the Temple of Heaven in Beijing, offering prayers for bountiful harvests and cosmic harmony. Droughts, floods, or earthquakes were seen as signs that the emperor had failed in his rituals, that heaven had withdrawn its mandate. Imagine the weight. An emperor could command millions, yet a single storm could brand him illegitimate. His reign, in the eyes of the people, lived or died on ritual. Among the Ashanti of West Africa, kings underwent initiation rituals that broke them before raising them. They were secluded, taught secret knowledge, forced to endure symbolic deaths before their enthronement. In Yoruba kingdoms, the king, or Oba, was bound by taboos enforced through ritual. If he violated them, he was sometimes compelled to commit ritual suicide. The throne was power, but also a trapa seat wrapped in chains of sacred law, invisible yet absolute. Cross the ocean to the Maya, and the story grows darker. Kings legitimized their rule through bloodletting piercing their tongues, ears, and genitals with obsidian blades, pulling thorny ropes through wounds, letting their blood fall onto bark paper and burn into smoke. That smoke was believed to open portals to the spirit world, feeding the gods and anchoring the king's authority. Without sacrifice, there was no king. Without pain, no crown. The people expected to see their ruler bleed, for only then could they believe he was chosen. In Europe, ritual was woven into Christianity. A king was no king until anointed with holy oil by the church. Without that sacrament, he was a pretender. The coronation oath bound him to God and to the church, and in practice, to the authority of bishops and popes. Even kings who defied Rome knew that without ritual, their legitimacy crumbled. Rival claimants could win wars, but the one who secured the church's blessing won the crown. Why did this matter so much? Because ritual is not decoration. Ritual is programming. It bypasses reason, speaking directly to the unconscious. To the people, it proved the king was more than a man. To the king, it reminded him he was less than a god. Ritual controlled belief, and belief controls reality. Think of the psychology at play. A man can seize power with violence, but violence breeds rebellion. A crown can be forged in gold, but gold inspires envy. Ritual, however, forges obedience inside the mind. If the people believe the king is sacred, they follow. If the king believes his own power depends on ritual, he obeys. It is a perfect trap. Ruler and ruled bound together by invisible chains. Consider the symbolism. Tears in Mesopotamia symbolized humility before the gods. Blood in Mesoamerica symbolized nourishment for the divine. Oil in Europe symbolized God's favor. Each element, water, blood, oil, fire, was chosen because it struck deep in the human psyche. They were not accidents. They were psychological weapons disguised as ceremonies. And here is the darkest truth. Kings were not masters of ritual. They were captives of it. A pharaoh might command armies, but if the priests withheld the festival, he was just a man in a crown. A Maya lord might rule cities, but if he refused to bleed, he was unfit. A European king might crush rivals, but without anointing, he was illegitimate. The stronger the ritual, the weaker the king. Even today, shadows of these rituals remain. Presidents place hands on holy books, swearing oaths. Leaders bow their heads before religious authorities. Judges wear robes, parliaments open with prayers, and the people still demand symbolic gestures before they believe power is real. The rituals look modern, but the principle is unchanged. Authority is incomplete without ceremony. Those who control the ritual still control the ruler. So when you imagine a king seated proudly on his throne, remember what history tells us. Behind him stood priests, magicians, councils keepers of the ritual. They held the chain. They reminded him with every humiliation, every drop of blood, every whispered vow, your crown is not your own. And this is the true secret of power. The crown was never just metal. The throne was never just wood or gold. Power did not belong to kings. It belonged to the rituals that bound them. The hidden ritual that controlled ancient kings is the same force that controls leaders today. They wear suits instead of robes. They speak of democracy instead of gods. But the principle is eternal. Without ritual, power crumbles. Without ceremony, belief collapses. And without belief, a king is no king at all. So the next time you see a ruler swear an oath, kiss a book, bow his head, or bleed for his people, remember, You are watching the chain tighten. The ritual whispers the same truth it has whispered for thousands of years. Truth to emperors, pharaohs, and kings alike. You are not free.